In today's video, we are going to explore best Viktor Frankl's quotes about the meaning of life. Let's get started. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. As we see, a human being is not one in pursuit of happiness, but rather in search of a reason to become happy, last but not least, through actualizing the potential meaning inherent and dormant in a given situation. As each situation in life represents a challenge to man and presents a problem for him to solve, the question of the meaning of life may actually be reversed. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life he can only respond by being responsible. Thus, logotherapy sees in responsibleness the very essence of human existence. As the struggle for survival has subsided, the question has emerged: survival for what? Ever more people have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. As to the causation of the feeling of meaningless, one may say, albeit in an oversimplifying way, that people have enough to live by but nothing to live for. They have the means, but no meaning. Challenging the meaning of life is the truest expression of the state of being human. Despair is suffering without meaning. Dostoevsky said once, "There is only one thing I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings." These words frequently came to my mind after I became acquainted with those martyrs whose behavior in camp, whose suffering and death, bore witness to the fact that the last inner freedom cannot be lost. It can be said that they were worthy of their sufferings. The way they bore their suffering was a genuine inner achievement. It is this spiritual freedom, which cannot be taken away, that makes life meaningful and purposeful. For the first time in my life I was able to understand the meaning of the words, "The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory." For the meaning of life differs from man to man, from day to day and from hour to hour. What matters, therefore, is not the meaning of life in general, but rather the specific meaning of a person's life at a given moment. Has all this suffering, this dying around us, a meaning? For, if not, then ultimately there is no meaning to survival, for a life whose meaning depends upon such a happenstance, as whether one escapes or not, ultimately would not be worth living at all. I would say that our patients never really despair because of any suffering in itself. Instead, their despair stems in each instance from a doubt as to whether suffering is meaningful. Man is ready and willing to shoulder any suffering as soon and as long as he can see a meaning in it. If there is meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an ineradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. If we take a man as he is, we make him worse, but if we take man as he should be, we make him capable of becoming what he can be. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. In times of crisis, people reach for meaning. Meaning is strength. our survival may depend on our seeking and finding it. Is it not conceivable that there is still another dimension, a world beyond man's world, a world in which the question of an ultimate meaning of human suffering would find an answer? It can be said that they were worthy of their sufferings. The way they bore their suffering was a genuine inner achievement. It is this spiritual freedom, which cannot be taken away, that makes life meaningful and purposeful. It is here that we encounter the central theme of existentialism. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in this suffering. It is one of the basic tenets of logotherapy that man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see a meaning in his life. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or a quest for power, as Alfred Adler taught, but a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her own life. Man can only find meaning for his existence in something outside himself. Man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see a meaning in his life. Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life and not a secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. This meaning is unique and specific in that it must and can be fulfilled by him alone. Only then does it achieve a significance which will satisfy his own will to meaning. Meaning must be found and cannot be given. Once an individual's search for meaning is successful, it not only renders him happy but also gives him the capability to cope with suffering. Our main motivation for living is our will to find meaning in life. Questions about the meaning of life can never be answered by sweeping statements. Life does not mean something vague, but something very real and concrete, just as life's tasks are also very real and concrete. They form man's destiny, which is different and unique for each individual. No man and no destiny can be compared with any other man or any other destiny. No situation repeats itself, and each situation calls for a different response. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her life. The meaning of my life is to help others find meaning in theirs. The meaning of our existence is not invented by ourselves, but rather detected. The quest for meaning is the key to mental health and human flourishing. The struggle for existence is a struggle for something. It is purposeful, and only in so being is it meaningful and able to bring meaning into life. The transitoriness of our existence in no way makes it meaningless. But it does constitute our responsibleness, for everything hinges upon our realizing the essentially transitory possibilities. There are only two races, the decent and the indecent. There are situations in which one is cut off from the opportunity to do one's work or enjoy one's life, but what can never be ruled out is the unavoidability of suffering. In accepting this challenge to suffer bravely, life has a meaning up to the last moment, and it retains this meaning literally to the end. In other words, life's meaning is an unconditional one, for it even includes the potential meaning of unavoidable suffering. There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one to survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is a meaning in one's life. These tasks, and therefore the meaning of life, differ from man to man, and from moment to moment. Thus it is impossible to define the meaning in life in a general way. They must not lose hope, but should keep their courage in the certainty that the hopelessness of our struggle did not detract from its dignity and its meaning. I said that someone looks down on each of us in difficult hours, a friend, a wife, somebody alive or dead, or a God, and he would not expect us to disappoint him. He would hope to find us suffering proudly, not miserably, knowing how to die. This uniqueness and singleness which distinguishes each individual and gives a meaning to his existence has a bearing on creative work as much as it does on human love. When the impossibility of replacing a person is realized, it allows the responsibility which a man has for his existence and its continuance to appear in all its magnitude. Those things which seem to take meaning away from human life include not only suffering but dying as well. I never tire of saying that the only really transitory aspects of life are the potentialities, but as soon as they are actualized, they are rendered realities at that very moment. They are saved and delivered into the past, wherein they are rescued and preserved from transitoriness. For, in the past, nothing is irretrievably lost, but everything irrevocably stored. Thus, human existence, at least as long as it has not been neurotically distorted, is always directed to something, or someone, other than itself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter lovingly. To be sure, man's search for meaning may arouse inner tension rather than inner equilibrium. Ultimate meaning necessarily exceeds and surpasses the finite intellectual capacities of man. What is demanded of man is not, as some existential philosophers teach, to endure the meaninglessness of life, but rather to bear his incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms. Logos is deeper than logic. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life he can only respond by being responsible. Unnecessary suffering is masochistic rather than heroic. View life as a series of movie frames. The ending and meaning may not be apparent until the very end of the movie, and yet, each of the hundreds of individual frames has meaning within the context of the whole movie. We can discover this meaning in life in three different ways. 1. By doing a deed. 2. By experiencing a value. And 3. By suffering. We must never forget that we may also find meaning in life even when confronted with a hopeless situation, when facing a fate that cannot be changed. For what then matters is to bear witness to the uniquely human potential at its best, which is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. When we are no longer able to change a situation, just think of an incurable disease such as inoperable cancer. We are challenged to change ourselves. We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life, and instead to think of ourselves as those who were being questioned by life, daily and hourly. Our answer must consist, not in talk and meditation, but in right action and in right conduct. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him. What he needs is not the discharge of tension at any cost, but the call of a potential meaning waiting to be fulfilled by him. Please let us know your favorite quotes from these best Viktor Frankl's quotes about the meaning of life in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.